History isn't always shaped by war. Sometimes the most profound changes in the world happen not on the battlefield, but in the quiet corners of power, where decisions are made far from the public eye. Sometimes it's a quiet decision in a closed room that changes everything. A single signature, a whispered agreement, or a silent nod can alter the course of nations. On what seemed like an ordinary day, India, the world's largest democracy, did the unthinkable. It stopped trading with the United States, sending shockwaves through the global order. The world watched in disbelief as India took a step no one had dared before. There was no declaration of war, no threats exchanged, just a silent seismic shift that rippled through every corner of the globe. The silence was deafening, and its impact immediate. This wasn't an act of anger or retaliation, but a calculated move. India was done playing by rules written in Washington. It was a bold statement. The era of American dominance was being questioned, and India was ready to chart its own course. For decades, the US dollar reigned supreme, and American markets were the ultimate prize for any nation. But the world was changing. New powers were rising, and India was determined to write its own rules, to shape its own destiny. Years of shifting alliances, careful diplomacy, and growing confidence had led to this moment. India chose sovereignty over subservience, independence over influence. It was a decision years in the making, built on a foundation of resilience and ambition. The world held its breath. Financial markets trembled. Analysts scrambled for answers, trying to predict what would come next. The uncertainty was palpable, and the stakes had never been higher. How could a nation so deeply intertwined with the American system just walk away? The answer was simple, yet profound. India had a plan. It had been preparing for this moment, quietly building its strength and forging new partnerships. For years, India had been quietly building new bridges, both literal and metaphorical, preparing for this very moment. Investments in technology, manufacturing, and infrastructure had laid the groundwork for independence. This wasn't a leap into the dark, it was a step into a new dawn. Across the country, hope mingled with uncertainty, but the sense of possibility was undeniable. A new chapter was beginning. The global south was no longer a spectator but a shaper of destiny. Nations that once watched from the sidelines were now stepping onto the world stage, ready to influence the future. The game had changed, and India had just made its move. The world's balance of power was shifting, and nothing would ever be quite the same. The world would never be the same. A new order was beginning, and India was at its very heart, reshaping the future one bold decision at a time. It all started with a tariff, an economic tool that over time transformed into a powerful political weapon. What was once a simple policy measure to protect domestic industries soon became a symbol of international tension and rivalry. The US, feeling the heat from its own industries and political circles, slapped heavy tariffs on a range of Indian goods, steel, textiles, and crucial tech components. These weren't just numbers on a page, they were barriers that threatened livelihoods and futures. In Washington, officials called it fair trade, a necessary correction to level the playing field. But in New Delhi, it was seen as nothing less than an economic assault, a direct challenge to India's growing ambitions. For years, India had negotiated, compromised, and tried to find common ground. But this time, the stakes felt higher, the wounds deeper. The mood in the corridors of power had changed. The tariffs weren't just a financial blow. They struck at the very heart of India's pride and autonomy. Factories slowed, workers worried, and a sense of injustice swept across the nation. The US expected India to comply, to quietly accept the new reality. But instead, India responded first with silence, a silence that spoke volumes, and then, with decisive action. In a move that shocked the world, India didn't just impose counter-tariffs. It went further, suspending all bilateral trade with the US, sending a clear message that its sovereignty was not for sale. The world was stunned, newsrooms buzzed, markets reeled, and analysts scrambled to predict the fallout. India was willing to absorb the shock, to endure short-term pain for the sake of long-term sovereignty. Supply chains shattered overnight, industries trembled, and millions of jobs suddenly hung in the balance. The risks were enormous, and uncertainty loomed over every sector. But for India, the reward was even greater, a chance to break free from economic coercion, to build a new, self-reliant ecosystem, and to inspire a generation of entrepreneurs and innovators. India was betting on itself, on its people, its industries, and a future where it set the terms of engagement. The gamble was bold, but the vision was clear. The old rules no longer applied. A new chapter in global trade had begun, and India was determined to write its own story. With the West's door closing, India turned east, to Russia. Their partnership, rooted in Cold War history, now became a lifeline. Russia offered India cheap, reliable energy, oil at a discount, keeping the Indian economy running. This wasn't just business. It was a strategic masterstroke. India insulated itself from global price shocks and sent a message: it wouldn't be bullied by Western sanctions. The partnership deepened: technology, defense, co-development. Russia, isolated by the West, found a massive new market. India modernized its military and secured its energy. This wasn't about ideology but shared interests. The Moscow-New Delhi axis was pragmatic, a new power center, independent of Washington. Together they proved that alliances could be built on mutual benefit, not just shared enemies. The world's balance was shifting. The West thought sanctions would bring India to its knees. They were wrong. Instead, India pivoted, turning crisis into opportunity. It diversified trade, built new alliances, and opened markets across the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. Indian goods found new homes. Made in India became a global standard in the emerging world. India invested in manufacturing, semiconductors, renewables, and digital payments, turning self-reliance into strength. The sanctions backfired. While the West struggled, India found a new equilibrium. Growth returned, jobs were created, and investment flowed from non-Western sources. The global South rallied around India, building a new economic network. The old dependencies were broken. The world learned coercion no longer worked. India had unleashed its true potential. The most complex piece? China. For decades, India and China were rivals. Border disputes, competition, deep mistrust. The West assumed this rivalry was permanent, but the new global landscape forced a rethink. Facing common Western pressure, India and China found space for cautious cooperation. High-level dialogues resumed. Tensions along the border were managed, not escalated. In forums like BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, they coordinated on global issues. It wasn't friendship, but pragmatic alignment. Rivals, yet partners against a common adversary. The rivalry remained, but open hostility faded. India and China learned to coexist, balancing competition with shared strategic goals. Two poles in a new Asian power structure, learning to cooperate in a world where the old leader was no longer unchallenged. The dance was delicate, but the stakes were enormous. India, Russia, and China's moves weren't just about trade. They targeted the heart of American power, the dollar. For decades, the dollar was the world's reserve currency, giving the US immense leverage. But the de-dollarization movement began quietly. Russia and China trading in their own currencies. When India joined, the movement accelerated. New payment systems, digital currencies, and bilateral deals bypassed the dollar and SWIFT. The logic was simple. Why settle trade in a hostile currency? By trading in rupees, rubles, and yuan, they insulated themselves from US sanctions. The more countries joined, the weaker the dollar became. This shift shook the global economy, challenging American exceptionalism. The world was moving toward a multipolar financial system. The era of the dollar's undisputed reign was ending. What is India's ultimate goal on the world stage? It's not about joining a new bloc or aligning with a single superpower. Instead, India's ambition is to achieve true strategic autonomy, a position where it can make decisions independently, guided by its own interests and values rather than being swayed by external pressures or alliances. This philosophy is rooted in India's updated non-alignment policy, now called multi-alignment. Rather than isolating itself, India is actively building relationships with all major powers, forging partnerships across continents and refusing to be locked into any single camp. This approach allows India to maximize its options and maintain flexibility in a rapidly changing world. For example, India partners with Russia on defense technology, engages in complex dialogues with China to maintain regional stability, and keeps diplomatic and economic channels open with Europe and Japan. Each relationship is carefully balanced, ensuring that India's interests are always at the forefront. In this new era, India is emerging as a crucial swing state, a central node in a decentralized, multipolar world. Its ability to engage with diverse nations gives it unique leverage and influence. India isn't choosing between East or West, it's boldly choosing itself, charting its own course and setting its own priorities. This independent stance is driven by a deep sense of civilizational pride and a long-standing desire for true sovereignty. India wants not just a seat at the global table, but a voice that commands respect and attention. India's assertive foreign policy is a reflection of its growing economic might and newfound confidence. As its economy expands and its influence grows, India is no longer content to play a secondary role. Instead, India seeks a balanced, equitable world order, one where no single nation or bloc dictates the terms, and where every country, big or small, has a fair say in shaping the future. By steadfastly refusing to take sides, India makes itself indispensable to all. Its neutrality becomes its greatest asset, drawing the world's attention and respect. It's a delicate high-wire act, balancing competing interests and navigating global rivalries. But if India succeeds, it will secure its place as a truly independent global power, respected by all and beholden to none. In the end, the art of no allegiance is not just a strategy, it's India's greatest strength and perhaps its most enduring legacy on the world stage. The alignment of India, Russia, and China raises a provocative question. Is a new axis forming? This isn't an alliance of conquest but a pragmatic coalition resisting American hegemony. Together, they represent vast resources, populations, and military power. If formalized, they could create a self-sufficient bloc, immune to Western pressure, a new Cold War, but with two equal sides. The world would split into competing spheres, global institutions would stall, and the internet could fracture. The era of globalization would end, replaced by bloc-based competition. India's break with the US was the catalyst, proving a major power could defy the West and thrive. A new center of gravity emerged, pulling others into its orbit. The world order was changing irreversibly. We stand at a crossroads. India's bold move has shattered old certainties. The unipolar moment is over, the world is more complex and unpredictable. The central question, will India fully join the Russia-China axis, or continue its independent path? If India aligns with them, a superbloc could dominate Eurasia and challenge American power, dividing the world into hostile camps. But if India maintains multi-alignment, it could act as a bridge, fostering dialogue and a more fluid multipolar system. The choice rests with New Delhi. Its decisions will ripple across the planet. The West hopes to pull India back. Russia and China hope to cement a partnership. The global South looks to India for leadership. The stakes couldn't be higher. India's quiet rebellion has already changed the world. Its next move will define the future, and the world is watching.